Hello and welcome to Next Generation Leadership, a webinar presented by Invigorate HR, Agilon, Accounting Principles, and Parker & Lynch. Thank you very much for joining us today and taking time out of your busy day to attend this webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a little bit of housekeeping items here. We will be sending a follow-up email after this webinar within 24 hours of the conclusion of this webinar. And this email will have information about how you can redeem those SHRM PDCs and HRCI credit. Again, by attending this webinar, you'll be eligible to earn 1 credit from SHRM and 1 credit from HRCI if you're looking for those. Some of you on the call really need those credits. The video of the presentation will also be accompanied with a link to the video will be accompanied with that email, as well as some follow-up handout and content that you can use and bring back with you in your day-to-day. So within 24 hours, you will receive that email. If you have questions for our panelists, feel free to use that chat applet that's part of this webinar platform. You can type your question into the chat. One of our representatives will be monitoring the chat room, and they will record your question. Hopefully we'll be able to get to it today. If not, we'll follow up this presentation and follow up that with a blog post answering some of those additional questions if we don't have time for every single question. But you can feel free to ask those questions throughout the webinar. If something comes up, feel free to just go ahead and ask. If you're having audio issues, also let us know in that chat applet. Someone from our webinar vendor will be with you to assist and help you get that audio or video that you need to watch this presentation. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Jeremy York. Jeremy is a lead consultant and president of Invigorate HR, an Indianapolis-based HR consulting firm. He has over 15 years experience in human resource strategy and operations. He's held various HR leadership roles and has worked with and advised all levels of management on critical business and people-related issues, including HR strategy, performance management, strategic planning, talent management and acquisition, leadership, and more. Jeremy's expertise in defining and understanding the big picture enables him to translate business needs into tangible solutions. With his guidance, organizations have improved employee relations, increased performance, and developed cultures based on mutual trust and respect. In addition to his leading role at Invigorate HR, Jeremy is the director-elect of the Indiana State Council of SHRM. He's certified as a senior professional in human resources by both the Human Resource Certification Institute and with the Society for Human Resource Management. He's a faculty member at the Department of Organizational Leadership and Supervision at Purdue University and a regular speaker at SHRM chapters and conferences. We're so lucky to have him partnering with us today and presenting in this webinar. Thank you for being with us, Jeremy, and welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
All right. Our second panelist is Laura Schrader. She is the National Vice President of Accounting Principles and Parker & Lynch Consulting. These are both recruiting firms in the finance and accounting industry. She's responsible for business strategy and brand initiatives for the company nationwide, and she works closely with senior leadership and local managers to continually ensure the business is operating at the highest level of service to candidates and clients alike. Laura has a BA, bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Oregon. Go Ducks. She started her career with the company in 2005. That's, by my count, 13 years. And she started in the Portland, Oregon market. She's worked in multiple roles overseeing regional sales, company-wide operations, and training. And throughout the years, Laura has contributed as a trainer, developed client retention strategies, new techniques for attracting top talent, and represented accounting principles at accounting and finance conferences and speaking engagements across the country. Welcome, Laura. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jason. Glad to be here.
So, Laura, why don't you kick us off here and just talk to us a little bit about the companies that you're representing today.
Sure. So Agilon Accounting Principles and Parker & Lynch are part of the Adecco Group, the world's largest staffing firm. And these brands are really key to the Adecco Group's professional staffing portfolio, and each division serves clients and candidates within specialized recruiting and search functions. Between these three companies, we have 72 offices across the U.S., and we place thousands of professionals in temporary and direct hire opportunities each year. We service a multitude of industries and company sizes in all of our markets, and we have over 1,000 colleagues working across the U.S. I'll tell you a little bit about each of the specialties of these three different divisions. So Agilon is our professional staffing division focused on temporary and permanent placement in 4 specialized areas. We have office and executive administration, supply chain and logistics, human resources, and non-clinical healthcare. And within those 4 specialties, they are placing professionals at all levels from very entry level to VPs and directors. And Agilon operates in about 65 metro areas. Next up, we have Accounting Principles, and that is our accounting and finance temporary staffing division that focuses on temporary and temp-to-hire positions for staff accountants, analysts, payroll, bookkeeping, and operational accounting functions. We also do direct hire staffing for entry or mid-level corporate accounting and finance. And Accounting Principles operates in over 70 metro areas. And then lastly, we have Parker & Lynch. And Parker & Lynch is our executive search and consulting division with separate teams that focus on accounting and finance executive search, legal executive search, and then consulting services for interim executives and senior level accounting and finance project professionals. So that's a little bit more about our 3 divisions.
Thanks, Laura. Jeremy, can you tell us a little bit about Invigorate HR?
Absolutely. Invigorate HR is a multidisciplinary HR consulting firm that specializes in helping small, medium, and large-sized companies with their HR strategy, anything related to people management, culture development, diversity, any of those kinds of things that relate to really enhancing your employee group and enhancing productivity. Things like HR strategy, talent acquisition, performance management, talent management development, all of the things. I always say that if it falls underneath the HR umbrella, we pretty much work in that area. So we enjoy our clients. We enjoy putting together customized solutions based on where the talent's business plan is currently, where their plan is going for the future, and ensuring that we can help them be successful overall. We're located in Indianapolis, but we serve companies all across the country, not just within the state of Indiana. So perfect. So with that, Jason, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what we're going to be covering today within our webinar. And so today's discussion is really going to be centered around leadership styles of the past, present, and future. It's important for us to understand how we need to lead our workforce and what we're going to be doing. It's also important for us to understand some of the challenges that we're going to face moving forward, understanding different generational traits and tendencies on how we can best work with some of these folks. We're also going to be discussing strategies for leading each generation. Each generation responds to work styles and differently and have their own work styles, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about a few other takeaways and give you some resources and tips at what you need to do to be effective and how you need to be effective and what kinds of things you should be considering in order to manage the workforce of tomorrow. So let's take a look at leadership and just some of the different leadership styles that we have that are out there. So what we really want to talk about is what is leadership? And I think it's important for us to understand, a strong definition of leadership. So I provided a definition that I feel that really represents leadership well, and that is the act of inspiring subordinates to perform and engage in achieving a goal. Now, if you look at that particular definition from businessdictionary.com, there's one word that I think should stick out to everyone and really resonate with you, and that is the word inspiring. That's what leadership truly is about. It's about inspiring others to meet goals, to move the needle forward, to be able to get folks to get on the same page, to accomplish the same kind of initiatives that you want to do. And inspiring others isn't as easy as what people think. What we really want to understand is that, leadership is more than just barking orders at people. We have to get people on board, and we have to really do our best to sell them on our ideas in order to get things done. So let's look at a couple of definitions from some pretty successful people on what leadership is. We hear from our buddy Bill Gates that leadership is those who empower others. And I really love that definition overall because the word empower. It's not about one person being in charge. It's about leaders empowering other people to do their jobs, to make decisions, to bring ideas to the table, to be innovative. Leadership is also can be defined as lifting a person's vision to high heights, the raising of a person's performance to a higher standard, the building of a personality beyond its normal limitations. And that's by our good friend Peter Drucker, who knows about leadership and knows what it is like about to lead others and to motivate others. Then probably one of my favorites by a guy you may not know so well. That's President John Quincy Adams. I'm sure you all have heard of him, of course. But it's something that his definition has really resonated with me, and that is if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. And I think that pretty much sums up what I feel like is the essence of leadership, the ability to be able to get others to take action, to do more, to be more than they are, to learn more, to be able to share learning. And that's what we have to do as managers. And a lot of people will say, you know what, hold on, Jeremy. That's asking us an awful lot. That seems like it could be awful difficult for us to be able to try to get folks to do that. Well, really it's not. It's all about our leadership style. It's about how we advance and move others forward, our approach. And so leadership style is really the manner and approach of providing direction, implementing plans, and motivating people to take action. That's what we do as managers, supervisors, team leaders, project leads, whatever. It's all about us being able to get other people to work toward a common goal. So the way that we approach it is critical and is key. We have to mobilize others toward that common vision to get them to work toward that goal. We have to look at how we build consensus and seek compliance among other people. Everyone just doesn't get on the bandwagon. We have to, find out what's important to them, find out how to relate our goals to their goals to get them to seek buy-in. That's how we get compliance from them to be able to do what we need them to do. Leaders also demand excellence and quality. And I want to be careful with using that word demand. I'm not saying that we should bring down the iron fist, but we should have high expectation of excellence and quality in the work that we do. Being able to illustrate the utmost importance of our work and being able to do the best that we can. We also have to create emotional bonds and harmony, and this is about building relationships with people. How we're able to connect with them, how we're able to relate, how we're able to get a relationship or a connection to them so that they trust us with our credibility. They look to us as being a leader, and they're on board with us doing what we ask them to do. We also have to demonstrate the value that other people bring, how they do their work, what they do, their thoughts, their ideas, why those are important to the whole team, to me, the leader, the group, everyone. We have to demonstrate that value and show that what they bring to the table is something we need for them to do and is important. And we also have to develop other people for not just today, what we need now, but for what we're going to need in the future. we know that as we plan, make business plans, set goals, we're looking ahead to the future, to the success that we want to accomplish. And we know that sometimes we may not have the skill set, or we may not have the thought processes in place, or even the general operational processes in place that we need to achieve that success. So we have to develop other people and think about what they need in order to be successful. So let's take a look at history, what we've done in the past and where we're at today. Historically, leadership styles have been based on the existence of a formal hierarchy where decision-making really rested at the top. Managers, leaders, whomever are the ones who gave the orders. Employees were expected to comply with that. It was more of a focus on downward communication where people were being told what to do. There was very little emphasis on employees, what kinds of training they needed, what kinds of resources. They were just expected to get things done. They were, expected just to produce, not necessarily think or be creative or innovative, but to get tasks done. Work had to get done. And they were awarded or rewarded for accomplishment of tasks, not for creativity, not for innovation, not for being the best at problem solving, but for just doing the work. And that's what history has kind of taught us. And it makes sense when you look at where our country has come, with the Industrial Revolution and the invention of machinery and products. But now we understand that in order to get things done, we have to focus more on people. So as we look to the future and we look to what we're going to need, we have more of an emphasis on teamwork. If you remember back in the late 80s, 90s, self-directed work teams were introduced into the workplace, which was something different. The way that people were taught at the college and university level shifted from individual to group and teamwork. Collaboration was expected. Leaders wanted to get the input of people because they began to learn the value of getting folks who actually worked on the front lines of the business and say, hey, how can we make things better? How can we meet customers' needs? And so they begin to expect that collaboration. They begin to solicit feedback from employees by, encouraging upward communication, by doing employee surveys, asking employees for their input, and allowing employees to have a little bit more autonomy in doing their work and decision-making. And so that was it. If we could empower employees, we could have them share in the responsibility for making changes and doing what we do best. That was really key in being able to, motivate the workforce and being able to help them move forward. So what's important about looking at our history and coming from this more hierarchy-based leadership concept into more of a collaborative-based leader concept continues to move and advance and move us forward. So we know that we had to change in history to accommodate for where things are today, and that means that we're going to have to be looking at how we move things forward. And that's going to be interesting because the way that we work today will probably be very different and most likely will be very different than how we work forward, work in the future and move forward. So I'm going to kick this over to our co-presenter, Laura, and she's going to talk about some of the challenges that we face in leading today's workforce.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. So I think first, when we want to understand the challenges, we need to look at some of the employment stats and trends. As we can see here, unemployment has been on the decline since the height of the recession. And during the recession, we topped out at about 10% in the fall of 2009. But since then, we've seen unemployment on a steady decline. And as of September, we're now down to 4.2% unemployment. So we've really fully recouped and have since added 3.5 million more jobs when we look at levels just prior to the start of the recession. What's more is when you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and their 2012 to 2024 outlook, the U.S. labor force is projected to grow 7.9 million to reach 163.8 million in 2024, and that reflects an annual growth rate of about 0.5% annually during that period. And I think what's interesting is that for some of the industries that we serve, and for many of you attendees that are watching, the average projected growth rate for some key industries are really leading the way. And you'll see here we have human resources at 7% projected growth, accountants and auditors at 11% projected growth, the financial industry is 9% projected, and supply chain and logistics at 8%. And these industry numbers represent averages from the BLS's occupational outlook. Now, for those of you on the call that are in the accounting or finance fields, we're also seeing extremely low unemployment in those sectors, averaging around 2.5%. One additional challenge when you really dig into the numbers further by level of education is that for high school graduates, the unemployment is fairly in line with the national unemployment average at about 4.3%. But many of you on this call may be looking to hire in the near future, and if you're searching for anyone with a college education, the rate drops to 3.6% for those with some college or an associate's degree, and then drops even further to 2.3% for bachelor's degree and higher. So the more education that you're requiring, the lower your pool of unemployed candidates. Now, another big challenge that we definitely have to address is this baby boomer exit from the market. And you'll see here this chart from the Pew Research Center highlights the decline in baby boomer population as we near mid-century. So we've seen 8 million baby boomers have dropped from the labor market over the last 4 years, and millennials have now surpassed boomers as the dominant generation in the workforce. And baby boomers have always had an outsized presence compared with other generations. They were the largest generation, peaking at almost 79 million in 1999. And now we're really seeing this shift towards millennials becoming the dominant generation. So you'll hear us address quite a bit about the millennials in this call because they are becoming such a major factor in the U.S. workforce. So what does the growth in the job market and the drop in skilled and experienced talent from the boomer generation really mean? Well, it certainly means that the war for talent is real. And if you remember back to about 10 years ago, 06, 07, we were in a very similar situation. There were more jobs available and fewer skilled professionals to work those jobs. And in addition, now what we have is millennial talent will really go where the best opportunities are, and they often leave companies scrambling to hire and retain. Millennials are not afraid to look at other jobs where they may find more interest or development potential. Now, we've all heard those millennial stereotypes that they change jobs frequently and they're always looking for the next best thing. But I do want to touch on some recent data that shows the true trends around how long millennials have been staying in their jobs. And I think you'll find this interesting. So this is from an article that The Economist recently came out with, and it talked about that caveat on the millennial job hopping stereotype. And that stereotype of the disloyal millennial is really contradicted by the hard data. Millennials are often willing to be mobile and open to the next best opportunity, but they are overall just as loyal as previous generations to their existing employers. So the BLS data shows that workers age 25 and over now spend a median of 5.1 years with their employers. That's slightly more than in 1983. And job tenure has declined for the lower end of that age group, but only slightly, and that's where we see that millennial generation. So if you look at men between the ages of 25 and 34, they actually now spend a median of 2.9 years with each employer, and that's down just from 3.2 years in 1983. So it's actually not a huge decline. Actually, middle-aged men are the one whose tenures have dropped over the last few decades. So I think this is really interesting data to keep in perspective as we talk about millennials, and sometimes we hear a lot of different stereotypes about millennials, but as you can see here, some of the hard data is really showing us that they do tend to stay in their jobs longer than perhaps we give them credit for. So how are companies addressing the war for talent? Well, you'll hear a lot about how to appeal to millennials because they are the largest workforce right now, but you'll hear about how to appeal to them with things like culture. So how trendy is the workspace? Are there work from home possibilities? What other perks will they get? And then, of course, a better hiring process, which I know is something that we're talking about in our company quite often. Can we make it quicker? Can we make it more transparent? Can we provide better feedback? Can we involve any type of gamification? How mobile is our process? And then, of course, pay. Are you paying a competitive salary? What types of benefits are included? And as a side note, if you haven't received a copy of our 2018 salary guide, it's a really great tool to ensure that you are in a competitive range with pay. So I think sometimes what we actually overlook when it comes to addressing the war for talent are those strategies, styles, and approaches that we employ to lead teams. And these are really those soft skills that many leaders have to hone through experience in the role. So things like how we foster a culture of development and growth, and how growth can really mean different things to different people or even different generations. And the importance of tailoring your leadership style to that individual, really understanding what approach will have the best results for both the individual and the company goals. And then, of course, motivating employees by valuing what's really important to them. So a real challenge exists for our leaders today. How do we address the needs of our teams where we might have members of 4 different generations working together, each with their own unique values? But before we get into some of those tactics, let's really take a look at these generations and some of the traits and tendencies and what motivates them. So I will pass it back over to Jeremy to talk some more about the generations.
Thanks, Laura. It really is important, to understand about these 4 generations that we do have within the workforce now. And if we are going to look at how we retain them, how we're able to, make sure that they're doing as much for us as they can while they're employed with us, we have to really understand what's important to them and a little bit about their backgrounds and how they think, interact, and view things. So we're going to start off with talking about the baby boomers. These were folks that were born between 1946 to 1964, roughly. Now, the dates that we have there are, they vary depending on what resource you have, but this is the timelines that we are going to use to be able to describe them. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that if you were to refer to someone as the me generation, they automatically think that that would be the millennials. Because a lot of folks believe millennials have a lot of self-entitlement. Well, actually, the baby boomers are really considered to be the me generation. Part of that is because they were one of the first groups to be able to truly pursue a lot of their dreams. Being able to first go to college in their family, being able to have access to different kinds of educational resources. So because of that, they really had to focus on themselves, and they were very competitive because there weren't a lot of opportunities, so they had to be at the top of their game. So baby boomers find themselves being a bit more competitive in the way that they see things, how they interact with others, what they do. They also are motivated by responsibility to others, and that's why they typically are very loyal employees, and they have a long tenure with organizations. For example, my mom just retired in January of this year, and she had worked for the same company for 48 years, which was pretty amazing. You never hear anything like that anymore about that kind of tenure, but the same company for 48 years. And part of that was because she was very much motivated by the responsibility that she had to the organization. She went in as an entry-level person and worked her way up to the top over that time period. And so, baby boomers want to be anxious to please because they get so much self-worth for being the best, for, wanting to get that praise from their employer, from their managers, etc. And so they take pride in that loyalty to demonstrate, if you're good to me, I'm good to you, and we're going to stick together and we're going to do this. And they work to demonstrate self-worth. So a lot of times they have they can be workaholics where they have a live-to-work perspective. And a lot of times they believe that other people should do the same, which doesn't necessarily translate across other generations. They don't really understand the importance of a flexible schedule or working from home. They have a tendency to think that, you have to be at work to do work, because that's the world that they grew up in. They didn't necessarily have technology the way that we do today. They also kind of expect respect from younger workers just because they've put in their time, they have tenure, they've been there for a while, or they have seniority. And so they automatically think that, they should be respected by anyone of any age. And, a lot of times it comes from the time period in which they were raised where, they were taught you respect your elders. So if anyone was older than you, you automatically respected them. And so that's translated down a lot into the baby boomer generation on how they work. Following the baby boomer generation was Generation X. And this generation is also known as Generation Xers or Doers, or as I like to call them, the Latchkey Kids. Now, it's interesting because I was doing this presentation and someone said, I don't know what a Latchkey Kid is. And, of course, that came from someone who was a millennial, and they were familiar with that. And if you remember, Latchkey Kids were the kids who carried their home key with them because they might stay home by themselves after school because both parents were working, or they came from a single-parent home. And so they had to spend a lot of time on their own, and they had to kind of fend for their own. So being at home and staying by themselves really had an effect on this particular generation. And a big part of that is it created such an independence with them because they had to be alone and had to be for themselves. And I can remember when I was a kid and both of my parents worked, and I would come home from school and I had to stay home by myself for an hour until my mom got home from work. And I did. You came home from school, I had my own key. I had a snack ready that I would eat. I made sure all the windows and curtains were closed, and I didn't answer the phone until, unless it rang and then there was a pause and then it rang again, and then I knew someone was calling. So, it was that generation of creating such an independence, learning how to be self-reliant, because you had to do that because you were spending a lot of time alone because both parents were working. Generation X also has, a real level of suspicion where they don't necessarily trust other people, and a big part of that has to come from this independence and self-reliance. But they were also one of the first generations to see their parents lose their jobs to mass layoffs. Parents who were, primarily baby boomers who were very loyal to their companies and, saw their parents lose their jobs. So that made them very leery of authority. And they didn't necessarily trust management, trust companies, because they didn't see what value companies bring. They saw their parents lose their jobs, which in a sense meant that it made things tougher at home, and made sure that they were, maybe be struggling and didn't have the resources they needed. So they're very much leery of authority. They're also doers, or driven by tasks and result. They seek to work smarter and not harder. They really are not into not really into micromanagement. They like to be trusted to do the things they need to do and be empowered to make decisions that they want to make. They also strive for work-life balance where they don't live to work, they only work to live, so that they can enjoy their life and be able to, express themselves the way they want to express themselves, spend time with family, be able to vacation. And this is one of the first generations to really feel like this was a priority. They also really embrace technology and they adapt well to change. As long as change is understood and they understand, their role in it as well. And so this was one of the first generations, again, where, technology, fast-paced change was really introduced. And so they really had to understand what that meant for them. And, this kind of overspills into the workplace as well. Following X is the millennials, and this is the generation that mostly everyone is all familiar with because they now are, as Laura pointed out, the largest group within the workplace. They are fiercely independent. This group is, fiercely independent because they've had so many experiences with technology. They appreciate achievement because they've been rewarded for achievement. Whenever they've done something, they've been, given certificates or they've been given trophies. They are very much into demonstrating how they have accomplished something and getting things accomplished. They also value diversity and technology and work-life balance, all very much important to the millennials. They have high expectations of their workplaces where, they kind of only want to work with positive people. They have no time for negativity, no time for gossiping, no time for drama. They just want to be at work, do their work, make sure their work is valuable, it adds value to what they're doing, and they are achieving their goals. That's a big component for them. They also expect when they come into the workplace to have significant on-the-job training and development. A strong onboarding program is something that they're used to. They really want to understand and learn. They expect a lot of information. They expect that they are provided with all of the information necessary and details necessary to be effective in their job. And they really prefer a lot of instant feedback. This is the first generation that's been ever able to just tweet the president and be able to get a response, right? They've had so much technology in the way that they communicate that they've been able to get instant answers. And so they like that. They want that information instantly. And this is another group, too, that where they've really gotten used to a lot of instant feedback through technology. But I always go back and look at drive-thrus. You're hungry, you go to the drive-thru, you get food instantly. And they kind of grew up on that, where their parents constantly were going through drive-thrus and, and that kind of spilled over into their lives as they got older with instant communication and feedback. Last but not least is one of our newest generations in the workplace, which is Generation Z, or known as Generation Next, or iGen. They were born in 1997 and beyond, and they are a generation that is inundated with information because of technology. They are in a world where they get continuous updates, but they're a little bit more private on social media than perhaps the millennials are. They don't necessarily broadcast every moment of their lives on social media. It's because they're more used to it now. It's not as new. Maybe the novelty is not there like it was for the millennials. They also process information faster than any other generation due to the invention of apps such as Snapchat, Instagram, if you work with Slack, things like that. But, they process that information faster because they're used to it, and it's coming at them from all angles, which makes them expert multitaskers. I know they talk about that, no one multitasks well, but this may be the first generation that actually, are the best at multitasking because of that. They're able to shift between work and play with multiple distractions going on and happening in the background. So, so much of their work and their personal lives are integrated through technology that they can adapt and switch back and forth quickly. They also are very independent and entrepreneurial as well, much like Generation X. Which also means that they maybe have more interest in starting a business or following their own dreams than maybe some of the other generations because they've seen it done. They also don't necessarily value education the way that we have valued education in the past because they've seen so many people be educated, spend thousands of dollars on degrees to yet not have any jobs in the job market. And so they also see other people starting companies that don't have any kind of secondary education at all. So that can be part of why they're so entrepreneurial. And they're also very big on individuality. Primarily because they're maybe one of the first generations that has really had a global perspective their entire life because of technology in general and news organizations. They have that global perspective. They understand what's going on in the world, and they're troubled by world issues. That also means that they're very big on diversity and gender inclusion, something that they've seen and read about throughout history, the different gender inequality, diversity inequality, marginalized groups of people they've been exposed to, and they are really warriors to make sure that they're inclusive and their workplaces are overall inclusive. And so this is something that we have to take into consideration as we're working with these folks and understand how we need to shape our work environments and what that might mean for us overall as an employer. So when we think about some leadership tips that we want to provide you and be able to ensure that you have in your tool belt, that's how we actually need to communicate with them. Laura mentioned that it might be important for us, and it really is important for us, to adapt our management styles based on these individuals. And that's what we have to do, is that a lot of times we have to look at each of these folks, what generation they may come from, and then be able to adapt ourselves in the way that we interact with them that best relates to them. So let's talk about that. Let's first start off with the baby boomers. When interacting with baby boomers, it's important to have one-on-one communication. Remember, they're the me generation, right? So it's kind of all about them in a sense. And I don't say that negatively, so please don't anyone take that the wrong way. But they prefer the one-on-one conversation because they like that one-on-one time that makes them feel important, that you value them. So it's, if you're sending a lot of emails or chat messages or what have you to someone who's in the baby boomer group, they might find that to be very impersonal as opposed to personal. So one-on-one communication is important. You also want to put a focus on relationship building because that illustrates their importance. You want to give them respect and you'll get the results back. You'll get respect back from them. You also want to empower them with autonomy because they like to work independently. They like to work on their own and be charged with a lot of responsibility. So, give them that autonomy to make decisions. Listen to their ideas and viewpoints to make sure that they're included. That also illustrates their value. And give them financial rewards if you have them. That's something that's important to them. In their mind, pats on the back are great, but financial rewards really illustrates that they've been doing a good job. And so you want to kind of keep that in mind with them. You also want to look at them at maybe mentoring younger workers on how they can pass on knowledge and information. That also sends a message to them that you value them as a leader and believe that they have a lot to offer to other folks. So it really builds on the relationship that you're trying to establish with them, and also, demonstrates to them that you respect them enough to be able to entrust training and mentoring other workers. Then let's look at our Generation X. So they prefer informal and immediate feedback. So they really like email. That's a preferred kind of communication for them. One, we talked about them being independent. The reason they like email so well is that they can control it. They can control when they respond to it, how long it takes to respond, etc., where they can't necessarily do that with one-on-one communication. So they really enjoy that email exchange. You want to make sure you don't micromanage with Generation X because they are that independent and they are a little bit more entrepreneurial, and so they like that that independence of being able to do their work. Tell them what's expected of them and allow them to be able to do that. You also have to incorporate work and family balance. Let them, if they need to leave during the workday to go attend one of their child's functions at school, or they need to leave a little early, go ahead and, let them do that. They're going to make sure the work gets done, and they will find ways to get it done and make that up. But they need to be able to have that work-family balance. If they are not experiencing that, they're probably not going to be happy. You also have to offer them room to grow, not necessarily upward mobility per se. While that is important to them, more about job enrichment and being able to enjoy their job and how much responsibility they may have and be able to enlarge that job overall. You want to empower them to make choices. You want to give them choices, let them have decision-making. Part of that is because of the independence, because they get a choice. And you want to provide mentoring to them in the sense of, dealing with others and how they relate to other people. And they can even be a good mentor for some of the younger generations as well. For Generation Y are millennials. They are team-oriented. You want to make sure that you offer a team-oriented workplace where you allow a lot of creativity and collaboration. Again, this is a group of individuals who have been educated in a manner to where collaboration is important and that they've worked in a lot of team kind of projects. That's what they've experienced. Is they've played a lot of sports that relied on the team, a lot of collaboration, and so it's important that you create that kind of environment. The interesting thing is that with millennials, they see work as a place to achieve their own personal goals and to help them grow as a person. So From an employer standpoint, you've got to align work goals with personal goals. You've got to find out what is important to these employees, so that you can make sure that you align work appropriately. If they feel like work is contributing to their own personal development and growth, then you're going to have a satisfied and happy millennial, and that's important that you align that work goal with those. You want to allow them to work with friends and confidants. They want to see that people that they work with are their friends, and they might want to spend time outside of work with them. It's very different from previous generations where people just went to work, do your job. Can't tell you how many times that I would hear my parents say that I just go to work, do my job, and I leave. Well, for millennials, they want to go to work, and they actually want it to be meaningful relationships with the people they work with. So you have to kind of create that environment. You also have to explain the why behind decision-making and help them understand why the decision was made or why this is the way we're moving with things. They like to understand that so they can, kind of be tuned into the big picture. Technology is also something that's extremely important to them, and that's one way to earn their respect is being able to have technology within the environment. They're also, only will give respect when you show respect to them, and technology can be part of that in showing them that you respect them by implementing different kinds of technology for them to work, ensuring they have the right kind of technology that they can work on, et cetera. But, again, another group that has grown up with technology and has used it in all facets of their lives.
Okay, and if I could just add a few more things about that Generation Y, the millennials, because it is such a critical generation in the workforce. This generation really craves excitement and new experiences at work, and they're anxious to prove themselves. So if you can do things like provide them with small projects to start with, let them build their confidence and dependability in the organization. They expect a lot of feedback and rewards and recognition. They like to be trained and mentored. With regards to rewards and recognition, ask yourself, do you have a program in your department or your company that recognizes and rewards employees for a great job? And this is a great opportunity to maybe put a millennial in charge of developing something like that for your department. They do want room for growth and the opportunity to be in leadership positions. And if you don't provide those opportunities, they may be tempted to leave for a competitor that does. They also are going to prefer more of that casual team atmosphere, and Jeremy talked about that a little bit. But they do want well-defined parameters of acceptable performance, so it's very important to communicate that to them, as well as an open-door policy with communication from top to bottom. Ask for their opinions, too, in coaching sessions. I think that millennials really want a seat at the table. They want to have a chance to have their voice heard. So asking for their opinions goes a long way with them. And also really going back to how is their work meaningful? And millennials want to make a difference, so let them know how the work that they're doing is making a difference. I can tell you an example. One thing that we did in our company, because we do have a lot of millennials that work here, is we developed a program that allowed each person in the company one free day of vacation time in the summer to go volunteer and give back to the community by donating their time to a charity of their choice. And we asked them to submit a picture of them volunteering, and then we compiled this into a really fun slideshow that illustrates how our colleagues are willing to make a difference and give back in the communities. And this idea really came out of having such a millennial-dominated culture.
Excellent, Laura. And, it is important, to provide that kind of volunteer time. Like you said, that's awesome. And, those are the kind of things that you can do to really engage these folks and to show that their outside interests are really important to the company as well. So, again, aligning company goals with individual personal development goals. So then we have, last but not least, Generation Z. And this is a generation that honestly is quite different from their predecessors, the millennials. And what's interesting with Generation Z is that they're a little bit more relaxed in a sense of where, they want clear expectations, they want reward for achievement, but they also don't necessarily require as much of the employer, except for one thing, and that is strong leadership. So for them, they need to have strong leadership in place to be able to, be happy at the employer level. And so this means that leaders have to be able to, again, provide those clear expectations. They have to be, create highly defined kind of small work groups that they can be in, know that there are rewards for achievement, but most of all, being honest and having a level of transparency where you can share information with these folks. They want to know that they can trust their leader and that their leader can be open and honest with them to have the good, bad, and the ugly conversations. This is something that is important for them, is that they want to see that true upward and downward communication really working well, that they are able, if you as the manager are able to give them feedback about their performance, etc., they want to be able to give you the same kinds of feedback about what they need from you or what they don't need from you or how they need you to support them, etc. So that's a different kind of conversation than what a lot of leaders are used to having with employees. You also have to look at investing in soft skill training. And this is something that's different for organizations as well. In the past, we've expected that when someone comes out of school, they've graduated from college, they have their degrees, that they are going to have all the necessary soft skills that we need for them to be productive. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. While technology is great, it has really, kind of lessened our one-on-one individual kind of communications. And many times, Generation Z does not have quite the sharpest skills as it relates to one-on-one and communications. So as organizations, we have to look at what we need from a soft skill level, and we may need to start providing more of that in the way that we train and onboard within Generation Z. Because they have been heavily relying on technology for so long, we may have to start offering more soft skill training as it relates to, the people element and one-on-one element of things. We also have to provide them with social collaboration, and that is through social collaboration tools that are either online or even creating more relaxed atmospheres. There's a lot of organizations now that are creating collaboration space so that employees can come together and bring their technology, their laptops, what have you, their smart devices, and be able to work on projects together, et cetera, in this collaboration space. And that's important. And as I've mentioned, the technology component, working virtually, is something that's important to these folks as well. They've obviously demonstrated that you don't necessarily have to be in a physical workplace to get work done, et cetera, or to communicate, and so they kind of expect that as part of their working environment to have quite a bit of flexibility about working virtually and what that means.
And just a few things that I would add in here, Jeremy, is provide them diversity in the tasks that they're doing, allowing the flexibility to learn new things, and give them a variety of projects to work on in a fun environment. That really keeps them engaged. Generation Z loves hands-on and collaborative work, as you had mentioned. And then promote a fun office environment, reinforce with positivity. When you provide Generation Z with a good working environment, that's really important to them. Their success is far greater than when they're in some sort of a working environment that's a little bit more stressful, or perhaps they don't collaborate well with other employees. We definitely see that their success has been hindered. As you mentioned, they enjoy that virtual collaboration, and they love to be connected in and out of the office. This is a very mobile-driven generation, so you can use their talents in that area for various projects and allow them to collaborate virtually.
Now, as you'll see on your screen, we have compiled together just an overall list of these 4 generations and kind of the tips that are there. This will be available to you so that you can use it as a good resource tool to kind of refer back. So if you find yourself, taking a glimpse at your team and thinking about who falls into which particular category and how you might need to interact with them, you can use this as a tool to be able to get your mindset in the right place to be able to have those conversations and think about how you might need to adapt your communication style, your management style, leadership style, how you interact with different individuals based on what you know about their particular generation and these tips that we provided for you. It's really important that we do our best as leaders to really try to work with each individual and provide the support that they need. When we talked about the original definition of leadership, it was inspiring others. We have to, as managers and leaders, look at our individual employees and determine how do we inspire them. No, you don't have to do that on your own. There's nothing wrong with being transparent and asking them what they need from you. How can you best support them in their roles? What do they need from you to be successful? And those are okay questions to ask. So many times I talk to managers, and managers feel like they have to have all the answers to all the questions when it comes to managing people. And I tell you, that's not necessarily the case. There's nothing wrong with going to your employee and saying, hey, I want to be a strong manager for you. Tell me what it is that I can do to help support you and help you achieve the kind of success you want in this particular role. And utilizing these tips can really help you be able to do that. Now, when we think about this next generation and what we need to do to really help and support them, we've developed some pillars of success. And these are all actions that you should take in order to ensure and promote success within the next generation that's out there. So let's talk about pillar one. This first pillar that we have is where leaders are charged with identifying change, creating a vision to guide the change through inspiration, and executing the change in tandem with committed members of the group. This is an important element of, leading change, but creating that inspiration, helping them see what your vision is, and helping them get on the same page. When people are following a leader, they want to ensure that that leader kind of has mapped it out, what we're doing, and that they believe in that as well. And that you're willing to be there right by their side in order to, make the change, execute the change, make changes to the change, whatever it is. But you have to be there to be able to lead with them and make sure that you see that they're committed because you're committed. The second component, or second pillar, is where leaders focus on the big picture within an organization and delegate smaller tasks to the team to accomplish them. If you're a leader and you're trying to do everything on your own, that's not helpful. That doesn't create buy-in. That doesn't inspire others. But when people get to be a part of the bigger picture, that helps inspire them. So by delegating smaller tasks to the team, you're getting them involved. You're showing how they're part of the bigger picture and what they do is important. And so you're creating that buy-in. You're inspiring them, and you're building that alongside them. It's really about collaboration and involvement as you focus on that big picture. Our third pillar is motivating employees and to enhance productivity and efficiency through communication and high visibility. So you have to communicate. We have to collaborate. We have to make sure that employees know what's going on. I always tell managers a lot of times that, if we don't tell employees what's going on, or if we don't tell them what to believe, they're going to create their own narrative, whether it's right or wrong. And you don't want them to do that, especially if it's the wrong narrative, because that spreads like wildfire. So that's why it's important that we, make sure that we enhance that communication, we enhance that collaboration to help motivate employees to be most productive and effective in their roles, and that show how their creativity and their innovation relates to our success. The fourth pillar is developing employees as individuals and not just as employees. And we talked about the importance of aligning work goals with personal goals. Employees nowadays do not want to be seen as a number. They want to be seen as people. They want to be developed as individuals. They want to know that they matter. And as a leader, when you spend time with them and understand what's important to them and set aside or set up goals that align with what they want to do with their lives and how they want to be successful, you can use that to your advantage by making sure that you align the work with that. So aligning the work with their personal goals. That's very important. And our fifth pillar is that employee input is sought out through employee surveys, feedback systems, and one-on-one conversations with managers. Again, where we're really trying to get their feedback. We really want to involve them. We're collaborating. We're getting their their feedback. We're getting their ideas. We're allowing them to participate in conversations, to solve problems, to come up with new products, new answers, new resources, whatever it is. But again, we're utilizing their expertise and their talents in making sure that we're getting the work done and accomplishing what we're doing. We've seen that employees need to have a high level of touch, a high level of involvement. We can no longer go back to where we were in history where everything was driven by hierarchy. We have to move forward to where everything is about collaboration, about involvement, about connectivity, so that employees feel and can see how their job brings value to the organization and how it makes a difference in making sure the company is successful. So as we look at everything put together with our leadership component, it's important, one, that we see that it's employee-centric, that it's focused on the employee, it's focused on what's important to them, and how we use that to our advantage as leaders to get the work done we need for the organization. That's what next generation leadership is all about, is being able to ensure that we collaborate, communicate, and we make employees participate in our goals and what we are trying to achieve as an organization.
Well, that's fantastic, Jeremy and Laura. Thank you so much for your time today and your great expertise and insights. We're just about out of time, but we're going to take a few questions from the chat. Before we do that, I just want to remind everybody, for those who maybe came in just a little late, we'll be sending a follow-up email with all information, how to claim those SHRM PDC and HRCI credits. You'll receive that within 24 hours, along with the video of this presentation and some handouts such as the deck and some helpful info sheets that you can bring back in your day-to-day. With that, let's jump into questions. All right, so our first question comes from Margot, and Margot asks, many employers are moving towards a more open workplace rather than traditional cubes. How do you think this affects baby boomers and Gen X?
That's a great question. It's interesting because with baby boomers and Gen X, baby boomers have a tendency to want their own workspace, and it's just part of them taking pride in their work. And so it's difficult for them sometimes to move to a more open kind of collaboration environment. Generation X is pretty, they're able to really kind of go back and forth. They can work in cubes, they can work in collaborative environments. They can kind of flex back and forth between the two. But baby boomers is where it's a little bit more challenging to be able to convince them why collaboration space is a little bit more important, because they do like ownership of their own workspace. So again, helping baby boomers understand that the reasons behind the change, why it's important, what collaboration is like, these collaboration spaces, what they're going to be like, and the reasons behind them, but also giving them an area perhaps that they can kind of call their own with a more open kind of space. That's something to take into consideration if that's possible as well. They just really have a tendency to really like to have more of take ownership of their work in their own kind of space and call it their own where they do that. Of course, millennials are not going to have much of a problem there. Xers will be able to adapt. But that's a great question, because it is very different with the way that they're used to working in the past versus to what we're expecting moving forward.
Great. Another one here from David. What role will leaders play in the transition of institutional knowledge from the boomers to the millennials?
That's an excellent question, and a very strategic question at that. One of the biggest things that organizations really have to focus on is how you get this knowledge transfer. So we've had the baby boomers who were such large contributors to our workplace, and understanding how the organizations worked, understanding products, services, the history, and they typically have a longer tenure in their role, so they've got a lot of institutional knowledge. So employers and organizations have to determine how they're going to create that knowledge transfer. And it's important to have a plan with that. One of the biggest ways to do that is just to have have these baby boomers be mentors to, Generation Xers or millennials or whoever it is that's going to need to know this information. Have them be mentors. Have them document some of the information that they have that's within their heads and not necessarily written down. Put together a plan for those baby boomers to have that information. What you've got to be paying very close attention to is making sure that you get they have a download of all of that knowledge that they have about the organization so it can be shared with everyone else. It might even be asking them to participate in development of training courses or curriculum, or maybe even if they're developing what's going to be delivered. Sometimes not everyone's a trainer, but they might be able to be a trainer and share that information to demonstrate how important it is that they participate and how valuable they've been to the organization and to give that information. But it is something that organizations definitely need to be aware of and paying close attention to, because you don't want the boomers to be retiring without passing all that information down. So it becomes the responsibility of the organization and its managers to try to pull that information out and decide how they're going to document it and get it shared with the rest of the team before baby boomers retire or exit from the organizations. It's a big it could be a big loss for an organization if you don't pull this information out from those baby boomers who have been there and people who have that long tenure, and it could just be lost history, and that's not what we want, because we know we can learn a lot from historical elements, where we've come from, where we've been, to help us shape where we're going. So, David, that's a great question. It's a role of leadership is very important, because leadership has to derive that knowledge transfer. If it's not being driven by leadership, then it's not being viewed as important, and then it's not integrated into goals and objectives of the organization.
And Jeremy, if I can just add something on this as well, because it's a very hot topic right now, and I actually just spoke in Kansas City yesterday about this idea of succession planning. And I think that when we look at the baby boomers retiring, and if we don't have a succession plan in place, we run the risk of the remaining generations being kind of this case of runaway talent. They don't see a clear path for growth for themselves. They don't see a vision for the future, so they go to other companies. And that's where I think having a succession plan in place that you can execute upon is going to be really critical to that knowledge transfer. With succession planning, I would say absolutely start now, especially if you have baby boomers that are looking to retire. And what it does is it will help you with that knowledge transfer, but it's also going to ensure more retention of the other generations that you have in the workforce, because there's still some really good knowledge, even if they've been there a year, 5 years, there's good knowledge there as well, and you want to make sure that you have a strong succession plan in place so that they see the vision for themselves in the future with your organization. Identify those knowledge gaps, and then really put a timeline in place of how you're going to start to transfer that knowledge from your baby boomers to the younger generations, and make it a plan that can be easily executed. But I think that one of the biggest things with succession plans that we talked about a lot yesterday is really this transparency. The more that we can be transparent with the fact that we recognize baby boomers are retiring, we recognize that there are Gen Xers and millennials and Gen Z that want to move up, we need to get them the knowledge to make them better in their next role, their next move. You will get everyone on board and working towards that common goal. I think that we just need to be extremely transparent and proactive with that succession plan, and that will help with making sure that we do have that knowledge transfer.
Great, that's great stuff. Now we got over 30 questions. And unfortunately, we only have time for one more. But we will follow this up with maybe some content. We take some of your questions, and maybe perhaps our panelists could give us some answers to some of your questions, so that we can provide some answers to those questions. We got a lot of great questions here, guys, and I wish we had some more time. But our last question will be from Sarah. How do you recommend coaching baby boomers and millennials working in similar job functions on effectively communicating with each other?
That's a great question as well. It's important to acknowledge, as we went through with the presentation and we saw different ways of being able to communicate and work with the different groups, is to understand how each group works similarly and what their differences are, and so that you can adapt your leadership style accordingly. You've got to understand, which group, what types of communication they like, what types of communication they don't like, so that you can kind of adapt your style. Part of that is looking at both baby boomers and millennials and saying, okay, yeah, we may be doing the same kind of roles or same kinds of jobs, but each individual person, and it's not just necessarily generalizing or stereotyping into the generations per se, but understanding what are the preferred methods of communication each of these individuals or these folks may want. And perhaps some people want more one-on-one touches, other people want more electronic kind of touches, and just understanding what it is they require from you as a leader, as a manager, as a supervisor. When you're coaching baby boomers, you've got to look at what motivates them and how you tie in, how you're coaching with their motivations. Same way with millennials, when you're working with them, understanding that they are looking to advance, their careers and what they're trying to do. And so you've got to be able to, kind of position yourself in a way that you coach each of these different groups, based on what their particular needs may be. I know you have some other comments that you want to add into there as well.
Yeah, I think it's about creating that mutual respect and recognizing that everyone has different strengths that they bring to the table. One thing that I feel is very common across all of the generations is the desire for their voice to be heard. And we talked a lot about the different generations, and we made some generalizations about each one, of course. But one thing that I feel remains very constant is that desire to have their voice heard, to have respect and a seat at the table. So when you have different generations working together, one thing that you can do is get them together and allow each of them to have a platform to discuss the things that are important to them. Sometimes those in maybe a younger generation might feel like they don't have quite as much of a voice. They don't have that chance to have that seat at the table. And so giving them that opportunity, I think, can help them with their communication with people of other generations, as well as making them not feel threatened by someone who maybe is of another generation and feels like maybe that gives them more clout, or maybe that gives someone a different perspective, but they'll start to respect everyone's perspective if they have a chance to allow their voice to be heard.
All right. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Jeremy and Laura, for your time today and your great expertise and insight. Like I said before, we'll hopefully get to be able to answer some of those questions. We had a lot of good questions that we just couldn't get to. But in some follow-up content, so keep an eye out for that. Don't forget that we will be sending that email out with all the credit information for both SHRM and HRCI, and you'll also receive the slides and a link to the slides and the video of the presentation as well. So again, thanks, Jeremy and Laura, for attending. It was great today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody who attended today, and have a great rest of the day. Take care.
you.